listeners, and welcome to the Downright Upright Show, the place to go to hear out loud and proud what Minnesotans are thinking. And I am your host, Philip Anthony. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you're all doing fantabulous. And fantabulous, Greg, is fantastic and fabulous. Put together twice as nice saves time.
It's you. It sums you up.
It's yes. I am a fantabulous person. I just don't want to be ordinary, I guess. No. But you're definitely fantabulous.
I'm something else, that's for sure.
Anyway, this is going to be fun, guys. My special guest today is Greg Bakun. He's the host of GhostBox Radio right here, folks, on AM 950, the only progressive radio station in Minnesota. So welcome aboard, Greg. Nice to see you, and thank you for doing the show.
Thank you for inviting me. This is really cool.
Yeah, and I know you have you're not an early bird, from what I'm hearing. So thank you again for coming this early and doing the show.
I'm kind of a promotional whore, quite frankly. Just tell me when to show up and I'll be there. So I don't know where this stuff came from. You're talking too much to Patrick, and that's always a mistake. So
well, yeah, But Patrick he's a little bit informative, so
he has his finger on the pulse of AM 950. So
he does. And the special thing about having you today is that we're in Halloween month. This is October. Yeah. Halloween's in a couple of weeks, I think, actually. Right?
Yeah, we're in spooky season.
We're in spooky season, so this is the perfect show to have you on.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I love it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with one of my boring questions that I usually ask my guests. The first question, because I like to build a foundation with my guests, so my audience can learn a little bit about you and what what made you Greg Bakun. How you became this wonderful human being that you are. So it's my custom on the show to ask where you were born, raised, went to school, and any other things, anecdotes you want to throw in there as well.
I had I was born in sort of northeast Minneapolis, which I consider not quite northeast Minneapolis. It's just a little bit off there, but my family roots are actually in northeast Minneapolis. So you go down to like where St. Cyril's is and the Ritz Theater and all that stuff. I mean, that's just kind of where the family was. And we moved out of that area and moved to St. Anthony Village relatively quickly after I was born. I was like 2 years old when we moved to St. Anthony Village, which is still borderlines Minneapolis. And from there, I mean, I spent my formative young years at a Catholic school, and
me too.
just trying to figure it out afterwards. And it's so funny because what I do now is so anti-Catholic. It's just they do not like. And when I say they do not like, it's the clergy, not necessarily the congregation.
Though they like that.
That's hard to get, though, too. That's hard to get that kind of rite to be performed, and that's a whole other issue right there.
Yes.
There's someone else that I went to school with. I didn't realize I went to school with. He's an artist, and he owns the Rogue Buddha Gallery, and his name is Nicholas Harper, and he invited me out to his gallery, which is in northeast Minneapolis, right next to the P&A Hall where my parents had their wedding reception, 50-some years ago, now 60 years ago. And and we're talking, and I said, you have a lot of similar friends on Facebook that I do, and like people I went to grade school with. It's kind of weird. Well, and I said, you got a lot of people from St. Charles Borromeo. He goes, well, I went to St. Charles Borromeo. I'm like, no, you didn't. You didn't go there. You don't look like anybody I've ever seen in my life. And here you are. And it turns out that we went to the same school together. And he's a recovering Catholic too, clearly. I mean, the imagery he creates is very haunting and beautiful. But it's like this is not Pope approved, so yeah, it's funny.
Well, the Catholic Church, like I'm like you, I was raised a Catholic, and There were stories that, like Medjugorje,
yes.
And then the Blessed Mother statues,
like Fatima.
crying.
Yep.
You can see the tears
Yep.
falling and people trying to take cups of the tears.
Yep.
So there are a lot of paranormal things that the Catholic Church kind of promotes, too.
I love those mysteries. Medjugorje is one of my favorite stories. I mean, who knows what's lingering? And I'm not trying to be funny when I say who knows what's lingering, like in the Vatican. And I mean that from a mysterious sort of level, opposed from the easy shots that we could take at it. But there is something. I mean, the history, everything else about it is pretty incredible. And so, yeah, I find it very fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Well, were you always interested in the paranormal, such as ghosts, UFOs, psychic phenomena, your whole life? Or did you have a personal experience that precipitated this interest?
I always had an interest. I think do you ever remember that series in the late 70s, early 80s, In Search Of? Have you ever heard of that with Leonard Nimoy doing I mean, that stuff is insane. It was really cool, and I love some of those films and stuff. But I say that I never had an experience that launched me into it, but I did have an experience when I was 4 years old, and it was almost like repressed. I hadn't thought of it in years, and that was my grandmother had died, and shortly after the funeral, we're in our house in our living room, and all of a sudden this waft of like just sweet rose smell came into the house, and then it left just quickly. And
yeah.
I said to my mom, I said, "What was that?" And she goes, "That's Grandma." Just like that. Now, I thought that
matter-of-factly.
Just like, that's Grandma.
Wow.
And so I thought I would dreamt that. And years later, before Mom died, I had asked her, literally, was this real? Did this actually happen? Yeah, she goes, I remember it. And she would tell me stories of after Grandma had passed that she'd go downstairs and there would be a couch that when Grandma would stay over, she'd sleep on that couch. And she'd be like, I'd go down there and I would see her just laying there. So, I mean, and it just never really resonated. It wasn't until many years later that I got interested in it, and not even from a metaphysical side of it, but from a pure technical side of it, because there was equipment that was being used that I thought, gosh, this is really cool. It's called a spirit box. And that's the device that is like a radio, but instead of you hit a scan, instead of stopping at stations, it keeps going through, and the theory behind it is that you can get spirit communication and you can have, in a sense, more of a live conversation with them.
Pardon my ignorance about this, okay? The only thing I can relate this to was that movie Poltergeist. Do you remember when they were trying to detect the ghosts in the house?
Yeah.
Is that similar to what you're talking about? Or
no, it's something different, but what is interesting...
Similar?
It's all ghost... it's all stuff to try to bring out spirit activity. So, yes. The thing is, a spirit box is part of paranormal investigating called ITC research, and that stands for intratransmental communication. So anything like electronic, if it talks to you, that's ITC. So if like all of a sudden your toaster starts talking to you, it's like your great aunt or something, right?
Has that happened?
Well, some people have said, like in the UK, some person said that there's a ghost in her toaster and then she married it or something, UK tabloids. But in Poltergeist, that little girl was in front of the static television and talking to spirits that way.
Yes.
Technically, that's ITC communication. Because it's all through electronic devices.
Right. But the part of the movie that I found fascinating, and I don't know if you ever had this experience with a guest or something, where remember when she threw the ball through the TV and it came out the other side, and
yeah,
that kind of, is that over the top fake, or does that happen? As
far as I know, that's a little bit too much, but the idea,
okay.
But the idea of like balls, like putting balls out and what, as an investigator, you have to, like, before you do any of this, make sure that the floor is level. Maybe put markings on, like using blue tape to make sure you know where things are located. So you're kind of doing a little bit of a scientific sort of thing to it, but then push the ball, and then it'll stop, and you want to make sure you're not on a thing that's not leveled, so it comes back at you, or at least that you know it's not going to come back at you, and then ask, could you please push the ball back towards me? And then it'll start coming back to you.
Wow.
So, I mean, maybe not as grand as coming through, going through objects like TVs, but not impossible.
Yeah.
And also, sometimes you'll find stuff goes missing in your house or something, and then it's found somewhere else. And it's like, well, how did that get through? Because it would have to go through walls and stuff. So it's not impossible, but, it's at the same time, it's a little like I'd like to see it to be able to understand it better. Because sometimes we kind of forget where we put stuff. Maybe we put something somewhere else and we didn't quite realize it. And then next thing you know, we're calling it paranormal activity. So you got to, and as an investigator, pretty much everything I do, I kind of remember where I put stuff so I can be cognizant if something does happen. I could be able to account for it.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of I guess, paranormal experiences from guests that you've had on your show, can you talk about a couple of them, maybe the two that fascinated you the most, that you kind of like questioned it to yourself, is this true? This is so crazy. Is it possible?
Well, that's hard because I'm a pretty good believer. I'm kind of like hook, line, and sinker over here.
You,
but I had an author on, Anna Maria Manalo, and she has written many books. One of them is called The Night Visitant, and she had it's stories of people who are seeing stuff that in one drive, this woman couldn't leave this little village. But she left in the car, and as soon as her and her boyfriend left in the car, he became horrible. He became aggressive. He became angry, almost like to the point of like being very belligerent towards her, being very destructive towards her. And at that point, she also started seeing literally an all-star cast of creepy reptoids, aliens, all around this village. It's something didn't want her to leave. And that is like, what on earth is happening here? Why is this happening? And that is just one of the things that, that does make me wonder, well, how true can this possibly be? Because that's a lot. I mean, that's like, the great reunion of all the creepies in the universe. But the idea too of people changing because of some sort of influence, the way that her boyfriend changed, that's frightening to me. That's almost more frightening than anything else.
Mm-hmm. But how do you? Excuse me for interrupting you. Where does the path cross between psychological phenomena like, being, multi-personalities or psychotic or schizophrenic and the paranormal? Where does that cross?
It's a very valid question. And as an investigator, if we get asked to go into a location, like a private residence, we'll do a very thorough questionnaire to people where it's almost intrusive a little bit. Like, do you have any history of mental illness? Are you taking any medications? We want to help anyone we can. At the same time, we got to protect ourselves. In the case of this woman, all I think that they can go off of is the fact that this boyfriend never was like this before. So, and then everything else started to go.
It just changed.
It just changed. Yeah. But, I mean, that's a huge question when it comes to demonic possession. I hate to keep bringing that into stuff. It feels like I talk about it all the time on the show now. But, I mean, it is very true that how much of that is actually, and this is why the rite of exorcism from the Catholic side of it takes so long, because they want to make sure that this is not some sort of mental illness, but rather truly a possession. But then the question that's raised from that is, how do we not know that the mental illness is caused by possession? So there's that thing that it's almost like, and I think the reason why they don't want to do it is because then they are afraid, the Catholic Church that is like being able to say, well, we can't make it different. We can't change the person. We can't cure them if it actually is mental illness. It's a fine line. It
Very
really
fine.
is, and it's something that a lot of people are careful for. And in fact, I'm part of a group called the Warren Legacy Foundation, part of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and we do investigations. And if we find that someone is actually needs help due to some sort of mental illness, we don't move them along like, sorry, we can't help you. We try to find someone in their area that can help them.
Yeah. I was listening to one of your shows. I'm going off on a tangerine now here.
I'm glad to hear there's one that listens.
Well, one particular one. Fascinating. There was this lady, I don't recall her name, but she was talking about people that were possessed by multiple demons, more than one.
Yeah.
So they had to get 2 demons or 3 demons out of the person. Do you remember? It was recently. I think it was a couple of weeks ago.
It might have been. I don't know if it was Bishop Rita Strugala or we've talked. Unfortunately, we've talked a lot about possession and stuff lately.
Yeah, I know you have.
And there's a book that I've had the author on before. It's called Holy Water Incident, and it's about his daughter playing with the Ouija board, and from there ended up getting possessed. And nobody would help him. No religion would help him. But when one did decide to help him, they found that there was over 1,000 entities inside that child.
Yeah.
I mean, so frightening stuff.
Absolutely. There are some very fascinating tales of creatures that are of great interest to people in general in the community. So, for example, Bigfoot, Chupacabra, the devil whale, I'm sure you know all these, space aliens, demons, poltergeists, ghosts, and that's just part of the big group there. Do you believe in the existence of all of these creatures, and there's some that are out there that are totally not real? Or can you give us some semblance of the truth? What's real here? What isn't? For example, there's movies that you see like Tremors where, people walk in and they get eaten. That's fake.
I wish. There's some
certain people
I wish they'd go to the desert now.
Yeah. So what? You're so funny. Help me out here.
So the one, and actually of all, one that had actually would make Carolyn angry when I'd say Loch Ness Monster doesn't exist. I firmly believe the Loch Ness Monster does not exist. I actually was on the show with Matt McNeil once. Matt brought me on, and we talked about it. And it just, when you look at it from a very logical level, it seems impossible. And to be one creature in this, I think it's like 22 miles of the nest, and I forget exactly what the width is, but it's not super big. It just seems, and you always have people there all the time across and lining up the entire Loch Ness. No one's going to see something. I mean, I just personally don't.
And there was a picture of somebody took. It looks like a brontosaurus, doesn't it, when you look at it?
And if it's a picture that you and I, which I always thought was my favorite picture of it.
That's the only one I've seen.
But it turned out to be a hoax. It was taken in 1934, and it turned out to be a tail of something. And it's the tail, and it's like kind of like breaks off, so to speak, and so it looks like a neck and a head.
Yeah.
But it's not, unfortunately.
Oh, all right.
And I only realized this like 2 months ago. I've been living in bliss thinking, at least we have that. It shows us something. No, that's apparently not real either. So what I do, generally speaking, though, my thought is, who am I to say that something doesn't exist normally? So if we're talking like Chupacabra or the devil whale, I mean, who am I to say it doesn't? I think it's less energy to say maybe it does. What do I know? Than being like, absolutely not. It's impossible. The earth is flat, all that stuff. That's just so much energy that could be used other places. I personally, I've seen Bigfoot. I've seen.
You have?
I have. This just past June.
Where?
In Kentucky, in West Point, Kentucky. And we had.
But he's only one person?
No, it's It's a race.
Family?
It's a race.
Okay.
You know, but what's different about Bigfoot than I think what people realize, and this is my belief, everyone has a right to their own. Bigfoot's a transdimensional figure. And yes, get your tinfoil hats on right now as we keep going down this rabbit hole. I mean, trust me, even I'm just like when we're talking about, like, oh my God, am I really saying this on the air? Yes, I am.
You're shocking me right now.
A transdimensional figure that can go anywhere. It's all energy. They're not animals. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not. It's not like a deer or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And you can if you have the right intention. You can pretty much probably will them to show up anywhere. You know, I mean, if it's safe for them, and would seem to be a safe place. I mean, we were at.
So, excuse me, is it a humanoid creature, or is it a completely different, unrelated creature to a human?
Yes.
Okey-dokey.
I mean, it's humanoid in the sense it's bipedal. So it walks on its legs.
Right.
You know, it
has 2 eyes.
2 eyes and
hands.
Yep, absolutely. They're just big. But they, you know, friend of mine who does a lot of this out in Kentucky, he calls them forest people. You know, he sees them on a very different level. And if you ever heard the term of like elementals, they are like fairies, and they're, you know, kind of more naturalistic. They seem, in my experience, when I've had strong experiences with these cryptoids, that they are always preceding the moment, if you will.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to movies now because
I broke you, didn't I?
Scared you to death. Anyway, but it's Halloween.
Yes.
This is the time to talk about it. So throughout my life, I've seen movies that scared the bejesus out of me. Okay? For example, not Chucky or Tremors and those kind of things.
I don't like those.
That's all fake crap. But movies that involved ghosts and demons. For example, I wrote them down here. Poltergeist, The Omen.
Yeah.
And movies about psychotic killers like Dahmer and Orphan. Mm-hmm. Those movies really could, because they're conceivable. I mean, there could be a person who is possessed, like you said, or someone who died and who hasn't found a way to cross over, and their ghost is haunting the house, the hotel, whatever it is. Can you elaborate a little bit on those movies that scared the hell out of me?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's just it. Like a couple weeks ago, I saw the Exorcist Believer film, and it's a good film. That was the most recent of the Exorcist films. Nothing holds a candle, though, to the original Exorcist film.
When she spun her head around, the pea soup came
Absolutely,
out?
and I did a show, and maybe this, I did a show a couple weeks back, or just last week. Who knows time? Bishop Christina Rake, and I just had her on to be like, this is the stuff that happened in the Exorcist movie that is like demonic possession. As an exorcist yourself, how much of this really have you seen? And pretty much every single thing that she had that I brought to her attention, she's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, she goes, when it comes to the vomiting, and this is really high quality radio at the moment, when it comes to the vomiting, I'm not going to make it on your best of, am I? We have, she's like, they've seen it where it's not vomit coming out, but rats or nails. And so, and it all comes down to the mockery. It always is. When it comes from a Christian point of view of exorcism, it all comes down to the mockery of the Holy Trinity. Mm-hmm. So the nails are like the nails of the cross. Mm-hmm. You know, that sort of thing. Or stuff happens on a Friday because Good Friday happened. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about – I asked you about things that happened to you that were paranormal. I'm going to introduce something that happened to me.
Yeah.
And maybe you can explain it because nobody seems to – I've had a lot of different people explain it, or your lives crossed or whatever, or your time crossed or whatever. So I'm driving home from work really late. I had come home from work late, and I'm driving. It must have been like 11 o'clock at night, and so it was dark, and there was nobody out. I was driving, carefree, 50 miles, maybe going over the speed limit. Sorry, folks, and but you just want to get home by that point, Anyway, and all of a sudden, I got this cold sweat over my body, and in my mind, I was seeing a deer. I just kept seeing a deer running. And I was shaking, so I had to pull over and compose myself. And I stood there, and I said, okay. And it went away. And I was like, okay. And then I started the car, went back on the road. Not even maybe 5 minutes later, I hit a deer in the butt. And it spun around, ran off. And I went, oh, what just happened? Oh, my God. I can't, maybe the past crossed over to the future. I mean, I don't know what the term is. Can you explain that?
Like a premonition.
I don't know what it was.
I mean, to me, that seems like...
was it psychically... was it a psychic phenomena to you?
Well, and it sounds stupid when I say it out loud, like most of the stuff I've said in this hour. But the thing is, it's like, is there a reason that it prompted you to stop your car and hitting... And maybe it saved you from actually doing more harm to you.
That's what everybody says, yep.
And that you just needed to pause for a second.
Yep, because I was going fast. Then when I hit it, I was going slower, but maybe about 40 at that point.
But maybe it was still delayed enough that the deer would have been somewhere else in the picture, so to speak, if you were going your speed.
How did I know I was going to hit a deer, though?
Maybe...
Is it a quinky-dink?
Well, no, I think that, I believe in spirit guides, and
That's what people have said, too. I mean, because my dad, I always felt, and I spoke about this on Kelly Wagner's show, Being Curious. She asked me about that, and I talked about my dad. He died very tragically when I was young, and I always felt his presence, always getting me out of these situations.
Yeah.
Something that could have been just another one of those things.
Yeah. I mean, not only is he your father, he's your spirit guide. He's always watching you. And even if you do have spirit guides, he's always watching you.
Yeah.
He always will.
Yeah. Well, we have now come to the part of the show I like to call the shift. But please say the F, because if you don't, we'll have problems.
Right.
We can get in trouble. Chad won't like it very much. So make sure you say the shift, where we shift the questioning away from your personal journey. As Greg Bakun, the host of GhostBox Radio. That's a tongue twister, though.
Yeah, we try to make it as difficult as possible.
And to current events. We'll talk about current events. This is a lightning round, so just throw some tidbits at me, and see, because I want to know what you feel about these things. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the one that's on everyone's mind right now. As you may have heard, Hamas terrorists sent a barrage of rockets into Israel that made an incursion and kidnapped innocent Israelis and killed them, along with their children and babies. What are your thoughts about this terrorist attack, and what do you think the United States should do about it? And also, do you think this conflict will shift Republicans away from their isolationism? Because they're very isolationist. They don't want to. A lot of them don't want to even be involved in Ukraine, which is being invaded by Russia. So
well, and it's tough because and I generally don't let out my political views, but I will since I've been asked that. When it comes to this, I think that I've read that Republicans are very much they have generally been in support of Israel, and I think much more so than Ukraine. So it'll be interesting to see, and I think we'll be talking about it when the other part of this is figured out what they're going to do. I mean, U.S. Needs to really be there to help. I mean, the fact that. This terrorist act, and I mean, we all have friends who have either family. I have a couple friends that are in Israel, and I'm checking in on them, and I'm sure hundreds of them are checking in on them. This is frightening. This is a very frightening time, and the fact that nobody is off limits. It's not military. It's not it's not casually, accidentally hitting civilians. They're targeting. They're killing infants. I mean, you can't get any lower than that. Mm-hmm. You cannot get any lower than that, and it has to be stopped. I'm just afraid that this is all part of a bigger issue of trying to deflect from Ukraine, and not from American side, but from Putin's side. Mm-hmm. And I've that was in my mind for a while. I'm starting to hear people, like I was listening to Stephanie Miller on the way in. They're talking about it. So it's, I mean, obviously, whatever needs to happen to stop it. And Republicans, they need to get their act together. They absolutely need to get their act together, and we need to start thinking in a more bipartisan way, because now it's a matter of keeping the world going, not just keeping the U.S. going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, so they are being a lot of them, not all of them. There are many who support Ukraine, and thankfully,
Yes.
But there are that small group I like to call the Looney Tunes, who think that being a Neville Chamberlain instead of a Winston Churchill, to try to stop an aggressive country. Yeah, they're killing civilians in Ukraine. They're killing babies. They're going into hospitals and shooting up the place. I mean, it's just crazy. Raping women. I mean, I could go on and on. It's just vile, really, when I think about it. And now, and I get the fact that you want to support Israel, and I'm totally for that. I mean, especially what happened. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, you have a country like Israel that's a right-leaning government who the people voted him in because Hamas will never recognize Israel. They said it. So how are you going to be able to sit at the table when there's no table? You know what I'm saying? Hamas is taking the table away. So that's, I guess, why the Israelis are voting for these right-wing nut jobs like Netanyahu. I think we need to get the Israelis and the Palestinians, two very smart people who want peace, sit down, talk, and try to work it out because lives are being lost.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and like I said, I think that there's a bigger connection than people think between these two wars that are happening right now. And one thing about it, too, is you look at mainstream media, at least, I watch a lot of CNN and stuff, and it's kind of like, Ukraine what?
Yeah, you don't
hear about it. All their main reporters that were in Ukraine are now in Israel, and it's a pretty sad reminder of how we as civilization, as how we're as smartphones and just we need to see what's the most recent or whatever, and the next shiny thing that shows up. And forgive me for being so cavalier about calling it that, but in a sense, it is very much the case where no one's talking about Ukraine anymore.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's a shame.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, those people need help more than, I don't want to say more than Israel does, but Israel is a very powerful country, and they have much more weapons and resources.
Yep, the IDF is pretty...
Ukraine is really pretty much depending on the West. And so...
Yeah. And I do worry about that, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that it's probably, I would think that, and I don't know this, but I have a feeling that Europe is going to be much more engaged with the Ukraine war, while U.S. will need to figure out what on earth they're going to do because they're needed.
It's going to be tough. And then another thing here is Kevin McCarthy. Remember him? The ex-speaker.
I remembered him 15 times in January.
Was ousted from his position as speaker because he worked with Democrats, which averted a government shutdown. And now they seem to be having trouble picking McCarthy's replacement. First, they wanted Majority Leader Steve Scalise.
Yep.
And now it seems to be Jim Jordan, the man who was behind the insurrection with Trump. I mean, it's scary. Mm-hmm. I mean, if he gets the speakership, which I don't think is going to happen, because there are some people in the House of Representatives that are on the moderate side of the Republican Party who are they're just not going to vote for him. So, talk to me about this. What are we going to do? I mean, what do you think is going to happen? How can we get our country back on the right track? Because the Republican Party seems to be like going off the rails. I don't know.
It's tough because I have a lot of friends who are Republicans, so I don't like to speak in broad strokes, but at the same time, I don't know how I cannot speak in broad strokes.
Trumpian. Let's say Trumpian.
Well, MAGA. I mean, to me, MAGA is a flag. It's a banner. It's something that people stand behind. No different than other dictators had in the past. Mm-hmm. It's I wish I could say that if you get Trump out of the picture completely, that this would have been avoided. I don't know if that's the case. It just feels like more and more. And I'm not far left. I consider myself a centralist that leans more left. So I have no problem saying when I think things go a little too far when you're talking to the left. But everything I see from the right is it's always about blaming other people. It's always about and one thing I've known over the course of like the Trump presidency is when Republicans don't want to agree with something, they don't go into detail about why. They just say that they don't. Whereas it seems like Democrats, the information, especially when you're talking about COVID, when you're talking about the stuff that really affects us, it's detailed, scientific, factual. There is something behind it where Trump thinks he can get away by saying it's just not it's just not a good thing for us, and I'm doing my best to stop it. That sort of BS that doesn't inform anybody, doesn't inform decisions. And what you're dealing with is people who just don't like the left, and that's what you're just dealing with.
Own the libs.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's all they want to do. I mean, they get pleasure out of seeing us. Remember, there's this meme that was going around when Trump became president in 2016 of this woman. She had a hat on, remember? And she's looking in the sky and she's going, ah! She's screaming. They love that. They love to see us in anguish. I am not saying I don't like Republicans, and I've said this on my show many times. There are normal, very normal, run-of-the-mill Republicans who just want less government, lower taxes, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that kind of Republican. The ones that scare me are the ones that they want to take LGBTQ people out of the equation, who are anti-Semitic, who are don't believe in democracy. I could go down the road. But
threatened by your existence.
Yeah, just by
you just being you. Yeah. It's like, how is that?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
And my audience knows me, because I say this on almost every show, that you can't groom someone who isn't groomable. If you're not gay to begin with, there's no way you're going to make the person gay. I don't care who you are, because I grew up in a very Catholic home, like I said, and was surrounded by being gay. You go to hell. It's terrible. Don't do it. Blah, 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 right? Bombarded with that. And look at me. I'm a gay man.
Yeah.
So nothing stopped me from being who I was meant to be. So that's my point. I mean, and so this grooming thing just pisses the hell out of me. And that's why I don't like MAGA for many reasons. Because it's a cult of personality. They don't have any platform. They don't have any issues they want to talk about. It's only about marginalization. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
The immigrant is bad, and the gay person is bad, and the black person is bad. We can't even teach AP African American studies in certain states because slavery has good points.
Right, it's good work experience. Right, DeSantis, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So this is Trumpism for me is scary. Republicans are fine. The ones that are normal, the Eisenhower Republican or the Rockefeller Republican, whatever you want to call it, they don't scare me at all, because I lived through Republican administrations. It was, other than maybe Bush, but it was kind of scary. But we had a normal life. It was just a matter of more taxes, less taxes, more government, less government kind of thing. Anyway. So now we're going to talk about – now, most of my shows, I like to bring up LGBTQ issues, as I have mentioned to you. I mean, being the only gay man that probably has a radio show anywhere around, I think my issues and my community's issues need to be put to the fore. So as a proud member of the community, I feel it's my duty to address the following issues. For example, California Senator Dianne Feinstein passed away.
Yep.
Recently, she was 90.
Yep.
She broke the glass ceiling defending women's rights and, of course, the rights of the LGBTQ community. So there was a mayor who was supported by Harvey Milk, who was assassinated, and so was the mayor.
Yep.
And she took over from that, and she said she was going to defend LGBT rights and women's rights for the rest of her life. That was her mission. So in the 90s, when it wasn't popular to support gay rights, she voted against the Don't Ask, Don't Tell bill and the Defense of Marriage Act. So what are your thoughts about the senator, as a tribute to her and for her work with women's rights and the LGBT community?
I mean, I think it's the first word I can think of is just bravery. Being able to be able to have a single voice, and there are other people I know, but I mean, the fact that once again, when people talk about the equal rights of women kind of starting in the 70s, which I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think it's still even necessarily true. But to be able to be to have in that position and to still be able to stand your ground. And I mean, that takes great courage, and to be able to just to say everybody has a right to living the lives that they want. It seems so simple when you say it out loud.
Yeah.
And that's what she wanted for, and we got to see that a lot of us agreed with her.
Mm-hmm. And she hated seeing little children and people in general getting mowed down with these weapons.
Yeah.
She was fighting against what do you call it? Those offensive weapons, like the AR-15 and yada yada.
Yep.
So rest in peace, Diane.
Yep.
You did a great job. You were a trailblazer, and we need more people like her.
And hopefully there were. Hopefully more people grew up idolizing her and are going into office because of her.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So this past October 12th marked the 25th anniversary of the murder of Matthew Shepard. Do you know who Matthew Shepard was? He was the gay male who was strung up on a fence and left for dead after they beat the hell out of him because he was gay.
Yes.
It was in Laramie, I believe Laramie, Wyoming was where it happened. So it was in a very rural area, and he was left for dead. I mean, they totally dehumanized the poor guy and left him for dead, and he died just because he was gay.
Yep.
So how can all Americans keep his memory alive? Do you think just, talking about it maybe more, or what can we do to humanize people again? Because I'm getting that fear, if we do move to the right, like some countries are doing, they are dehumanizing certain groups of people.
Totally.
And what can we do to remember him and to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
And it's hard for me to think about that without thinking about sectors of the United States, because I feel like there's areas in the United States that's just not possible anymore. Mm-hmm. I'd love to be proven wrong, but at least up in Minnesota, that's something that I think we can be very proud about. I think Minnesota is a great example of how Matthew's memory can be remembered. That we accept everybody and we love everybody. And I think if more cities could adopt that, it's not like asking for more taxes. It's not asking for building highways or building stadiums or anything. It's just asking for people to allow others to live the life that they want. Mm-hmm. That's all that needs to happen, I think. I feel I've never been one for having big memorials for people or anything like that. I think he would more rather, and if it were me, I'd more rather just know that people learned from this. And that's what I want people to do for this, is they learned that, people should be able to live their lives and be who they are. Mm-hmm. And it's scary. I mean, as someone who's a straight man, the idea of thinking in your shoes or other people's shoes of boy, what if I couldn't be who I wanted to be? That's frightening. And but that happens all the time.
Yes.
And that's all I want, is for everyone to be able to have that security that I have.
Correct. And I always say this on my show, I'm not African American, but I can I will support them till the day I die.
Yeah.
I want them to have the same rights as everybody else. I'm not Asian. I am not Native American, et cetera, et cetera. But I want this. That's what I love about Minnesota, because we are more free than any other state I could think of.
I think so.
Yeah. We have, people come here to be free here because they know that we accept trans people, for example, or we accept Native people here. We accept African Americans here. You go to some states, I mean, it's just bizarre, the laws. I mean, they ban books just because they mention Harriet Tubman or African Americans throughout history, and they ban the book. They won't let kids read what really happened. It's just scary, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, but we have a couple of minutes left here, so I want to end the show on a happy note because obviously, the second half of my show is always a little downer, so I want to lift it up before we leave. Halloween is coming.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the most popular holidays in the United States.
Absolutely.
Especially for little children and for some adults, too. But what are your thoughts about Halloween and being that you have an interest in the paranormal? What are your plans, or do you celebrate Halloween?
Absolutely, and I love nothing more than seeing the little kids dressed up in costume and their excitement. I just love it. It's so cool. I never had kids myself, but I just love seeing their excitement and stuff because I remember when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. Halloween, October 31st, is a Tuesday, and we got something actually special we're going to do here at the station. And we're going to be doing a broadcast. Normally my show is at 10 p.m. We're actually starting at 8 p.m. and going to 11 on Halloween night, and we're actually going to be doing it live from a location in Stillwater. So one of our sponsors, Midwest Witchery and Healing, Witch Jody, it's her store. We're going to be doing it live from her store, but we got access to the whole building. So we're going to have people set up in different parts. We're going to hopefully it translates well to radio. It's certainly going to be a lot of video that we're streaming on the Facebook page, but it's going to be half radio show, half paranormal investigation live.
I've heard Witch Jody's name being thrown around, especially with Kelly Wagner. I think she's going to be on her show too.
Probably.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to. So when is it again? The date and the time?
It's October 31st. It starts at 8 p.m. and goes to 11 as a live radio broadcast.
Right here on
AM 950, and we're doing it live in Stillwater.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
I'm going to be listening,
and it should be done in enough time that you can go out with the kiddies, get the candy and stuff, and then go in, and not going to be too scary. It's just going to be us having a good time and celebrating this fantastic holiday.
Yeah, and maybe instead of your theme music, you can have Vincent Price laughing.
Well,
because that's scary in itself. Every time I hear him laugh, it's just. He was so famous for doing all those horror movies like The Pit and the Pendulum and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so maybe maybe you need a copyright, I don't know, but getting his voice in there to celebrate Halloween would be fun.
Imagine making money just because you had a good laugh,
Oh, my God. He made so much money on that laugh alone.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
I didn't even do it. Anyway, unfortunately, we have run out of time, Greg.
I know. It went by fast.
I so enjoyed having you. Thank you for spending time with me today on the Downright Upright Show. Anytime you want to come, Greg, believe me, you're more than welcome. You're an amazing guest.
Well, thank you.
I could go on and on, but time keeps on slipping. Remember that song? Yeah. So I'm going to give them the listeners some information about your show.
Okay.
For more information on Greg Bakun and his show here on AM 950, go to GhostBoxRadio.com.
Yep.
Is that right?
That's right.
Or go to AM950Radio.com. And the same place you found the Downright Upright Show, and you could listen to his shows. And, of course, you could listen live at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday, yeah. And thank you again. I mean, it's amazing that you even came here sitting across from me, so thank you.
Oh, I appreciate it. I love being it.
Yeah, and if you ever want me to talk on your show, I would just love it.
Sounds good.
Anyway, lastly, I'd like to thank the audience so much for your for supporting the Downright Upright show with your clicks and your subs and all that stuff. You mean everything to me. I love you all. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Thank you so much for joining us today. And ciao for now, wherever the camera is.